Trails, Sidewalks, and Bikeways Committee. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA, this committee needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the committee is participating in this meeting from separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear and audible and at the appropriate volume for all other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call, ask each committee member participating in this meeting to state your name, the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following the roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. That's the purpose of this. To start, my name is Ken Comer. I'm the representative at large and chair of the committee, calling from my home in the Braddock district. Braddock district, Mr. Cosgrove, sorry, Bob.
This is Bob Cosgrove, Braddock district rep, calling from my home in Braddock district.
Hunter Mill, Mr. Rowe. No response. Mount Vernon district, Mr. Klein.
Yeah, this is Jim Klein calling from my home in the Mount Vernon district.
Drainesville district, Mr. Smith.
This is Wade Smith calling from my home in the Drainesville district.
Providence district, Mr. Foster.
Stephen Foster here, calling from my home in Providence district.
Mason district, Mr. Albright. Springfield district, Mr. Liebert. I think he sent me an email that said he was not coming. So no response from Mr. Albright, no response from Mr. Liebert. Lee district, Mr. Pipkin.
Here in the Lee district. Yeah.
Thank you. Sully district, Ms. Ampa.
Yeah, I'm here in Sully district and Oakton at my home. Last meeting, the agenda said I had missed it already, and the date on the agenda was different. So I watched most of the recording, but I wasn't here last meeting.
Okay, well, glad to have you here. And yeah, we did move it back a week last week because it was a holiday, a county holiday on the 11th. So, Clifton Horse Society, Ms. McDaniel. No response. FAB, Mr. Newman.
Good evening. This is Sean Newman representing FAB, calling from my home in the Springfield district.
Thank you. Fairfax Area Disability Services Board, Ms. Cohen.
Hi, this is Debbie Cohen, representing the Disability Services Board, calling from my home.
Thank you, Debbie. Fairfax County Federation of Citizens Association, Mr. Tipton. No response. Fairfax County Park Authority, Ms. Ionetta.
This is Beth Ionetta, calling from my residence in the city of Fairfax.
Northern Virginia Builders Industry Association, Ms. Portilla. No response. Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority, Ms. Reese.
Hello, this is Andrea Reese, Nova Parks, calling from my home in Arlington.
Washington Area Bicyclist Association, Mr. Albers. No response. Now I move that each member's voice who has responded may be adequately heard by every other member of the committee. We will approve this and all subsequent motions by acclamation. So I will ask now if there are any objections or nay votes. Hearing none, the motion carries. Second, we having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for the public to access this meeting. Therefore, I move that a state of emergency caused by COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the committee to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of this committee and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that this committee may conduct its meeting electronically through the Cisco WebEx video conferencing platform. This format will also provide a dedicated phone line. The public may access this meeting by going to fairfax.webex.com and entering event number 173-904-5196 and using the password Trails 2020 with no space, or by calling 844-621-3956 and using the access code 173-904-5196. It is so moved. I ask again if there are any objections or nay votes. Hearing none, that motion carries. It is next required to establish that all the members of the addressed in today's agenda, all of the matters addressed in today's agenda address the emergency itself, are necessary for the continuity of Fairfax County government and or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of this committee's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved. I again ask that there are any objections or nay votes. Hearing none, that motion carries. Lastly, some information about using the WebEx platform has to be provided. A video recording of the meeting will be posted on the Fairfax County YouTube page to provide access to the general public. A transcript of the chat and Q&A will also be part of the public record. WebEx users can virtually raise their hand by hovering their cursor over their name in the participants list and then clicking on the hand icon. Individuals calling in by phone can use the raise hand function by pressing *3. Board members and other panelists can also use the chat feature to pose questions. Other attendees can type questions in the Q&A. Please remember to leave yourself on mute when not speaking. If you're having connection difficulties, they may be improved by turning off your video. So before I that's the end of the script. Before I start with the meeting, I want to collect information on, first of all, the staff who are here. So could the staff identify themselves? Thanks.
Hi, this is David Loss from Fairfax County DOT.
This is Doug Shani. I'm the director of Fairfax County DOT.
Chris Wells, Fairfax County DOT.
Nicole Winans, Fairfax County DOT.
And Rachel Flynn, Deputy County Executive. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Any other staff? Okay, and I also want to ask if there are any members of the public or anybody else whose name I have not called and who has not identified themselves as part of the staff. Okay, bear with me. I'm going to move over, changing Windows is not easy. Some reason the computers have a name of their own when they go into video conference. All right, so we have a little bit of an unusual agenda tonight. Deputy County Executive Flynn has been kind enough to join us, and we have decided to devote our first 60 minutes to that with a follow-on for 15 minutes. Since we do not have members of the public, and David, back me up in case somebody does join later, see if you could monitor to see if we have somebody who hasn't been called and is not a member of the committee. Please alert me to that. But otherwise, we don't have to set time aside for members of the public citizen comments because we don't have citizens. So just preview of coming events after we hear a high-level look at county transportation planning. We will have a new items only staff report by Chris Wells, and then we'll be dealing with some active or unresolved issues. So without further ado, take it away, Ms. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Comer. Let me see if I can do this. I'm a real Luddite. Did it work? Can you all see?
Yes.
Yes. Very proud of myself. Didn't work the other day. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. And I'm trying to see if I can get rid of this little thing on the corner. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I've been here about 2 years now, and I've mostly worked in cities, some from somewhat small to very large. And one of the things I always notice is how important the street design is in affecting land use and the types of land uses we get, and how that affects the economy and what will be the economic drivers. So as you can see here, these are 3 examples of urban development that have occurred in Fairfax over the last 40 years, the oldest being Reston and the newest Mosaic, and now Tyson's is an ongoing, but this is the most recent at the borough. But we have a long history of planning here, like most places, or developing, I should say. Planning is another question, starting from the 1700s, the earliest map I was able to find, all the way to one of our most recent efforts for Route 1. This is the first map that I'm aware of, able to find in my research. And the reason I think it's so important is that maps about places will tell you a lot about how they came to be what they are today. So the area that's shaded is actually the county. And you can see there were just a few landmarks. Can you see my cursor? Yeah. Hopefully.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
we can.
This is the courthouse. It was actually in Tyson's in the 1700s, but moved to Alexandria. And then when Alexandria became a city, it went back to the county in the city of Fairfax, which was part of the county then. This was the Falls Church. But otherwise, what you see are, cow paths, Native American trails that became country roads. And that was really about it. Interestingly, we were on what's called the King's Highway, which started in colonial Williamsburg, the capital then, all the way through Fredericksburg and up through Fairfax to Annapolis. But we were always kind of a through place. We were never that place you went to, like Annapolis, like Williamsburg. And it's very telling about how we evolved. And the King's Highway had a variety of names: the Potomac Path, Accounting Turnpike, and then eventually Richmond Highway. And on that highway was a planned area called Alexandria. This was laid out by George Washington himself in 1749, about a 4x8 grid. Every block is about 3 acres, and they would subdivide the land accordingly, and people would adhere to the plan of this new town. This is the first map that we have of the railroads. At this time, there were 2 of them, the Alexandria, Loudon, Hampshire, which is now the W&OD Trail, and the Orange and Alexandria, which now is where Amtrak is. And you can see that everything went to Alexandria. By now, DC has developed, it's about 50 years old, but Fairfax is still just country roads, farms and forests. And here is an aerial, as it were. Here's DC, Potomac River, here's Alexandria. And then again, you see these country roads and the Loudon, Hampshire coming through Leesburg into Alexandria, going through Vienna. So rural Fairfax, really the land uses were just, again, farms and forests and small towns and villages. We had the town of Providence this time, which became the city of Fairfax, Centerville and others. And they were usually created by crossroads. So Bailey's Crossroad, literally called that, Annandale, Fairfax Courthouse, and then railroad towns started to appear, Vienna, Herndon, and others. And we did have one ferry, and it started in Colchester, which was Route 1. And then that, it actually got silted in, believe it or not, and so it moved upriver to Occoquan. But remember, back then, all travel was by foot horse, train, or even ferry. And people could only travel 3 miles an hour. Horses travel about 4 miles an hour or up to 20 or so if they're galloping. But that often determines the size of a place. That's why we, through civilization, we always built cities, and then we had open lands for food sources and whatnot. And then when the train came, that started to change a bit in terms of how far cities were spaced, but typically they were about 5 miles apart. And that holds true for Fairfax. So this was one of the first planned places in Fairfax, not as big as Alexandria, but just a small town. The land was donated by a wealthy landowner, and he knew that this was a crossroads, Little River Turnpike, and Ox Road or 123. And this is still here. This is Little River Turnpike today. Here is the town hall. And behind your right shoulder is where the courthouse was actually built. And of course, we have Vienna because of the railroad coming right through there. This picture is not from the 1850s, but you get the idea. And then Herndon, which of course is its own town now. And again, you can see the railroad coming here. But it was just a crossroads with a train station and a little village, but nothing major was planned in Fairfax in that regard. You had very large estates, obviously George Washington and George Mason with Gunston Hall. And then during the Civil War, this is how Fairfax had advanced. So you see more country roads, more crossroads. The reason you see some activity on the map is because these were the areas of fighting. So obviously that's Manassas Bull Run. And then these little dots here are the forts that were created to protect the District of Columbia. But now you can see the crossroads where Fairfax Courthouse was, in the city of Providence. You also see Vienna and some other places, Lewinsville, interestingly. But otherwise, you can see here, like Route 1, it was still just that country road where people passed through here and occasionally came to a crossroads for an inn or a restaurant or what have you. And the major arterials, as they were, are still there. So Route 7, or Leesburg Pike, Route 50, Route 29, and Route 1, all coming through here and starting to form the bones of the county. But they were just, again, 2-lane country roads. And then we got the railroads. This is, again, now the W&OD Trail. This is the Orange and Alexandria. But the third one, the Fredericksburg and Alexandria, wasn't in yet. So, again, you start to see towns form along this one, Fairfax Station and whatnot. And then 20 years later, it just continues to grow in terms of more country roads, but still no planning. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. It really just happened organically. They would continue as farms got subdivided further and further. They would continue to add more country roads, more crossroads would appear, and you can see them all start to show here. You've got places like Lorton appears for the first time, Mills Crossroads, which is now Merrifield. You've got Lewinsville again. So again, you could see how transportation and the road system formed the land patterns and the development that occurred and subsequently our economy. This is pretty much what it looked like. This is at Reston, where the railroad was. And this is Route 1, actually. So just little clusters of buildings. With the car now, you can see here's a gas pump. We think this is taken just below Huntley Meadows Park, but we're not quite sure. Now, all that compared to urban areas, which is mixed use and dense and a lot of height, and a planned grid of streets. Very different than how Fairfax developed over time. It was really well thought out. they would take all the land and everyone would agree, yes, this will be the street grid, and we will then sell land accordingly. Very walkable, because remember, you can only get, walk a mile, 3 miles an hour. So places tended to be quarter mile, half mile from where you needed to be. And then there were some railroad streetcars and eventually subways. And you can see here, Alexandria continued to expand. It's about double in size now, and it even has a canal that was on the right side. But everything beyond it was just farms and forests. And it was very much a bustling town. And one of the reasons they put it there, it was right on the water, as opposed to like Mount Vernon, which is up on a cliff. And so you could access the water. Before DC was built, you had Georgetown. That was the other port. So they were really critical for the economy. And again, if you look at the countryside, that's Fairfax and beyond. And then, of course, you have the great planned city of DC, designed by LaFont. And what's interesting here is they put the most important buildings, the Capitol, the White House, monuments, in the center of radiating streets. A very unusual plan. There are not many cities like this. And wherever two streets come together, then they would form a public space, sometimes a roundabout. But it was very well thought out in terms of the hierarchy of how to place buildings because of the grid. And this is what it looked like around the turn of the century. Very highly multimodal. You can see all the pedestrians, and horses are still around. If you look closely, you can still see a horse or two. I think there's one here and here. Streetcars were really important to the economy and how the whole city grew over time and getting further out into the countryside. But this little machine here, this was the beginning of when everything started to change in terms of how our cities and development places evolved. And even here you can see a bike, by the way. So this is an interesting book here, if you're interested in the subject, by a UVA professor, Peter Norton. And what he talks about is how our streets shifted. And so he argues that streets used to be for everybody and all kinds of activities. So this is probably an extreme version of Lower East Side of New York, but it was the marketplace. It's where everyone socialized. It was playgrounds for kids, daycare really, and you could travel on it. But it was for everyone, and that was really understood. Even when the car further evolved and became more prolific, you could still see a lot of pedestrians on these streets, not just on the sidewalks, but just crossing the streets where they would. I hope this little video will work. So this is in San Francisco on Market Street. And what you can see here is how everybody owned the street. It wasn't just cars with pedestrians only crossing at the crosswalk, but you just went wherever you want. You owned it. And it wasn't until the car came that pedestrians got relegated to crosswalks and were told where they could go. Even with cyclists, they went where they wanted. And it was because you didn't have to worry about safety, because before the car, again, horses could only travel 4 miles an hour unless they were going a little faster, but still they were pretty safe. And the beginnings with the cars only went 10, 15 miles an hour. And so they weren't a big threat. But as they advanced and got more powerful, that started to change. And so safety became huge. And cars were really seen as the enemy. Most people didn't have cars. Most people lived in cities. So you didn't need them. You took the streetcars, the subway, you walked, you had a bike, maybe a horse. It really became the demon, the speed demon. And so what to do about this? A lot of the victims were children. Today, even the number one cause of death for children is automobiles. And the mothers and fathers started building monuments to their dead children. And the automobile company said, no, you can't do this. You can't blame us. And so the president, Hoover at the time, put together a national conference on street and highway safety. And it was really made of the automobile manufacturers. And what they said was, you have to stop blaming the cars. It's the pedestrians' fault. It's not our fault. And if you keep blaming us, we're not going to be able to sell cars and expand vehicle use. So no more playing in the street, no more just walking where you would. The term jaywalker comes from the letter J, jokers. Only unsophisticated people just crossed the street wherever they wanted. Everyone else, followed the rules, you obeyed the rules, you got in the crosswalk. And it really started to shift the street and not become a place anymore, but just for throughput. This is where you can see that less pedestrians are just crossing the street where they will, but they still go into the street. This is Richmond, if you know Broad Street, not far from the Capitol. This is at 4th Street. And most people live nearby, walk to Main Street, as it were, or took the streetcar. And it was still very much pedestrian focused. The bus is just starting to come into being here, but still predominantly pedestrian. And 100 years later, this is the exact same spot. And when we shifted the focus to make sure our predominant mode of transportation was the vehicle, then we had to start storing the vehicles. So we had to tear down buildings for parking lots or garages. And in this case, convention center was put up. So a lot of the historic buildings were taken out. So there's really no place for the pedestrians to be. It's parking lots. Further down, interestingly, you start to see more activity. But this is what happened, not just in Richmond, but in many places. So in DC, by the 40s, when things were just about to change post-World War II, we still had streetcars, but most of the streetcars in America were gone by the late 40s, early 50s. But with this, it still attracted a lot of pedestrians and the density of buildings. Cars were obviously more prolific, but it was still shared. And then when the streetcars got pulled up, you really didn't have much choice. You really had to drive because Metro wasn't in yet. So cars dominated. We think the wood in this photo and the ground plane is there because Metro was being built, and this was where one of the stations was going. So that's that earlier photo where all the people were. You can see the DC area was about 1.5 million people, and DC itself was about half of that. It was 800,000, and that's when it peaked. And then, as you can see with the green lines, it went down, flattened in the 80s, 90s, started coming out in the 2000s, and now it's back up, not quite to where it was, but pretty close. And then, of course, what replaced it were these places like Fairfax County, the little orange line here, you can see, where it just booms. We still are the leader in population. This is Montgomery County is the blue, and Prince George is the red. So it's nothing you all don't already know, but you can see how the suburbs just explain this explosive growth up to about 5.5 million people. And then DC got a savior, which is Metro. It was remarkable when you think of the planning and to set aside the funds for this and to build this. This was a massive undertaking. I grew up in Maryland, and I remember when the Red Line opened, it was very exciting. And it really transformed DC and put it back on the map. And that population growth you see, where it started to go back up, it wouldn't have happened without Metro. And of course, it saved the city. Buildings that were getting torn down now get saved. New infill that's beautifully done and appropriate and still very walkable. And that, thank God, that grid was preserved. And we didn't have highways that were built that went right through the city. And we have some that go under, and other cities didn't fare so well, but DC's done quite well. Then suburban development came, and remember, there was never anything like this in the history of human development, going back to, 5000 BC with Babylon or whatever, Babylonia. You always had, again, that dense development of cities and towns, and then surrounded by open land, farms, forest, desert, what have you. But because we could travel so much quicker now, the whole land use pattern changed. And not just that, about sprawling out. That was a new word that came to be, but also about what's called Euclidean zoning. So before, we mixed up all the land uses in cities, not if you lived on a farm, but in a city or a town. Now you could separate them because you had the room and you had the cars. And it was a famous US Supreme Court case called Euclid versus Ambler. Euclid was the town in Ohio outside of Cleveland, I believe. And Ambler was the real estate developer. And Euclid said, we're going to decide what land uses you can have on your land. And they said, no, you won't. And they took it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yes, you will. And that was how it was born. And they actually wrote it into the law. So it was low density, low heights. And a new thing came, which was parking lots. We never had to deal with that before. And our transportation systems, again, were auto-focused. And we had new kinds of roads, not just highways, but arterial roads, collector roads, and then a thing called cul-de-sac. In transit, we still had them, but shifted from streetcar to buses. And then, of course, Metro came in. So if you remember this plan from earlier in the presentation that GW laid out, and 200 years later, this is the plan for Fairfax. And you can see they're two totally different ways of planning. The scale is now auto scale. This is human scale. And we didn't think about the particulars of, that fine grid of how it would work in Fairfax. It was more get the major roads in, and then the major landowners will figure it out from there. And so if we zoom in a little, this is Tyson. So here's the Beltway, which was built in '64. This is 123. Remember, it started as a two-lane country road, but now it has an interchange. This is Route 7 that you might recall from the 1700s, Leesburg Pike, very historic. It too has an interchange. And then where 7 and 123 cross, that too developed one. So it shifted from country roads to autofocused. And look how big the planning areas are, rather than, again, that fine grained grid. It just says apartments or convention center or whatnot. This is where Tyson's Corner Center ended up. This is Galleria. And I think you know the rest. So people could just buy a whole farm and then put houses on them and not worry about the rest of the infrastructure, about adding a corner store or adding the other uses that people need in their day-to-day lives, because those people could just drive to them. And they wanted to. We really thought this was going to be the answer to all things. And houses were affordable. There was the GI Bill and other government subsidized mortgages for mostly whites, and very difficult for minorities to get financing. So then that started to affect the segregation of America. Also, banks would not give loans to property owners in the district for apartment buildings, so they couldn't invest in rehabbing. So you saw the decline in many cities in America, and the money really went out to places like this. And it was what everyone wanted. You were out in the countryside. It was beautiful and clean and quiet. You had your car and your new schools and your new shopping centers. It really was the American dream. And then again, the single use came up. You remember the grid in Alexandria. Now it's just one use, and you cover it. It's enclosed. I mean, we never did enclosed shopping, but we could afford it. Gas was cheap. Remember when it was like 19 cents a gallon? And you had these major arterials that the government built. There was a lot of government money at the time. When Fairfax started, land was cheap and government money was flowing. And so we could build these massive arterials and keep extending them further and further out. And it really worked well. This is looking the other way. So this is the mall. And then you start to see just single use development with an office building here or there, but again, no planning. And then enormous amounts of land taken up for the automobile. This is about 3 acres right here. And imagine what you could do with that if you could develop it. But because of the focus on the car, our priorities shifted. And it was okay because you could keep going further out. So it wasn't a problem. And then, of course, you see all the parking lots that are starting to evolve. It's another example in Seven Corners. This was one farm, and they sold it to a developer who wanted to put a single use. If you notice here, so this is 50, and this is 7, and where the two cross, there was actually a roundabout, which is quite nice. That later got changed to an overpass, and these country roads became arterials. I think this is Wilson Boulevard. And so the largest and newest shopping center in the DC area opened, and people were so excited. It was shiny and new and different. And who wanted to go downtown when you could easily come out here? Traffic wasn't an issue yet. That was something we didn't really know about. But the land uses were isolated. So you have the residential subdivisions here. These were apartment buildings. The shopping here, later office buildings showed up on this edge, but people, they weren't walking to these places. It wasn't set up for that. And why walk when you could just jump in your car? We just never realized the environmental implications, the health implications, and other implications, right? This is looking the other way. So this is that triangle again. Well, that was a farm, and this 2-lane country road here and here. So now you have overpasses, and it got wider and wider and higher speed. Now it's totally unwalkable. So even if you wanted to walk, unless you're poor and you have to, you're just not going to walk. And we just didn't realize we were creating problems. We really thought this was the be-all, end-all. And then this man named Robert Simon comes, and he buys a farm, 7,000-acre farm. He comes from New York City. His family was wealthy. They owned Carnegie Hall. He used that money to buy Reston. And it looked like this. It was just the country, right? And actually, there was a town at Wheelie, where you have Wheelie Station. And it was a German named Karl Wheelie, or Max Wheelie. And he came after the Civil War and said, I'm going to build a town. Sadly, he died, so he didn't get to fulfill his dream, but this was Town Hall, and that's still there. That's Bowman's Distillery, and the lake is still there. I believe it's Fannie Mae or one of the companies like that, but there was some nice planning that started. So Simon builds on his love of cities, so he said, well, we're going to create a downtown here, and he called it the Town Center District and the Town Center Urban Core, which is what Rest Town Center became. And then there's going to be villages, so there's going to be 5 villages. He built Lake Anne and wasn't able to see the rest built, but you have the ones on the south side. And then there's going to be a less dense development on the periphery. So he really thought about different ways to live, preserving open space and nature and allowing for development. And then he saved this for what's called business and R&D. And those later became our TSAs, transportation station areas. And it was remarkably visionary. Modern architecture was all the rage at the time in the 60s. And they had this vision for how you'd live in the neighborhood and then how you'd come to the village, in this case, the Lake Anne Village, and it was nirvana. Got lots of press throughout the country and internationally. Here's a picture of Lady Bird Johnson touring Reston with Bob Simon. The only other place like this was Columbia in Maryland, and Jim Rouse, same idea, he loved cities, grew up in Baltimore. He did the same thing up in Maryland. Then those were the precursors to what became known as new urbanism. And there was a group of architects and planners who said, we can't just keep sprawling and destroying our farms and forests and the things we love and letting our urban areas go to pot. And so they founded the Congress for New Urbanism and said, we're going to concentrate development, we're going to make it walkable, we're going to save our open space, we're going to revitalize what we can. And it really has been a success. And the transportation associated with that is public transit, but the key is getting back to that street grid so places are truly walkable and really connected, and focusing on walking and biking. So again, here, this was, so Bob Simon gets kicked out. It doesn't work out financially. Golf takes over. And he says, well, I'll stay. And they said, no, you can go. So they end up, though, fulfilling the dream. And I remember by this time I was in college and grad school. And when we saw this, we just couldn't believe it, because we were so used to just shopping centers and office parks, and a new city was going to get built. This was a really big deal. And we just didn't know if it would actually occur. And it did. It was remarkable. The public spaces were well done. The details were right. The amenities, the heights, the balance of heights, the mix of uses, the architecture. It really was something to behold. And we're very fortunate to have that here in Fairfax. It's really a national model. And then, of course, it just started paying off. And you can see here 26% growth just in 3 years, in the billions, what it's done for Fairfax. And that doesn't include the buildings that are now under construction. This is where Fannie Mae is going, and VW. And then these buildings will follow next. This is right next to Reston Town Center is to your right. And this is the toll road, obviously, and this is right on Metro. Right across the way is Haley Rise. So these buildings are under construction now. We're getting a Wegmans, yay. And these other buildings will soon follow. And then we have Wheelie Station. 2 of the 4 buildings are this one and this one are done. And this is being built as we speak. And they're all leased up, also on Metro. Really beautifully done. Great public spaces. This is the plaza when you come out from Metro. And this is what you saw before. And this is all that's going to be added over the next, I'd say, 5 to 8 years. This is Comstock development. So it's really working. The plan is working. Here's one more. This is, it's called Campus Commons. So this is the toll road here. And the Metro is over here for Reston Wheelie. A nice mixed use development. But here's where street design gets back to land use and how it affects areas. So if you look at the street here, this isn't urban. This is very suburban. And if you count, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lanes wide, plus a 20-foot median, maybe so they can widen it further later, creating enormous intersections. And when this is where Campus Commons is going, Comstock is going to expand here. Some of the citizens who live south of here said, well, we want a pedestrian bridge. We don't want to cross this road, or how about a tunnel? And that's when you know a street is not properly designed right, because it's been given to those cars. They have the highest priority, and the highest priority is throughput. It's not about creating place, about slowing the speed, about calming it, and giving that street to every user, the pedestrian, the cyclist, the transit user. And so if we have to start doing gymnastics, I call it, over the streets. Not only is it very expensive, but it starts to fail, and most ped bridges don't work anyway. So this is what it feels like, and no wonder they don't want to cross it. But what if we could change this and really humanize this street? I mean, there's no doubt who this street is built for, and it's high speed, and that's not good. So what if it was more like this in DC? And this is 30,000, what we call ADT, average daily traffic. And 4 lanes of through traffic with on-street parking during rush hour. The on-street parking goes away, so you can expand the capacity. But you can see here, it just feels right. It's very human. And then the land uses reflect that, and they build closer to the street, and more people come out. So they don't hop in their car to go maybe 5 blocks they will walk those 5 blocks. And that starts to make a real difference on your street use. Here is Wheelie further down. We were looking over here. Same thing. One of my hobbies is counting lanes. So here you have another 9 lanes. It's just way overbuilt, and people tend to not want to cross here. Housing is getting added over here. A big hotel is going to go here. This is where Wheelie Station is. So wouldn't it be nice if we could bring this down to size? And I'll bet you people would start using this road more. So we're going to be studying this to see what's possible. Here's another one on Reston Parkway and Sunset Hills coming right into Reston Town Center. And again, it just sends the wrong message about car domination rather than a real place. Friends of mine who arrived here hearing about Reston their whole lives go, am I almost there? It's like, yeah, you're almost there. When you get to the core, it looks a lot better. And why not have all our streets look like this? This is what I would call a complete street that prioritizes every user and gives each one a value. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The other place that's done really well is Mosaic. This was a drive-in theater, and a lot of people in Fairfax worked hard to make this happen. Fortunately, they had basically a greenfield of 50 acres, but they planned it right. They put the street grid in. They decided, what uses would be where. They planned the public space very carefully in the core, put the entertainment use, the theater right there, along with the restaurants, complemented by the office. And this place is always packed. It's just terrific. COVID it's taken a hit because of that, but it'll bounce back. Interestingly, all the streets are private because they wanted to design them and control them. So that's something that we're paying attention to. Same with Reston Town Center. Those are all privately owned. And look at the growth when you get it right. You get your streets right, you get your land use right, and look at the economy and what happens. And then, of course, we have Tyson. So when it was decided that Metro would come in, call it the Metro necklace, there were 4 stations right in the core. It's just amazing what people before us did to make this happen, and even some people on this call. And so then the county decided to do a plan, and it's 10 years old this year. They divided Tyson's into 8 areas, and centered you can see the densities of where the purple is. We're centered on around the metro stations. This is to orient you. This is Tyson's Corner Center. This is the Galleria. This is Cap 1. And the plan has really worked. Staff worked very hard to compromise on this, to deal with, see all these teeny little buildings? Those are subdivisions surrounding this place on all sides. And that was not easy. Certainly Tom Bashani can tell you stories. He's here to tell the tale of all the compromises that happened, and they were worried about, guess what, traffic. And but the county leaders believed that Metro would really alleviate a lot of the traffic by designing this place right. We'd get a lot more pedestrian activity and cyclists, and the investments have been phenomenal. It's really remarkable. So remember, this is how Tyson started. It was just 2 country roads. And remember that suburban plan I showed you. So it was never really planned. And we're kind of working with an existing system that we're trying to now make urban. That it's not easy. But this is 123. I'm sorry, this is 123 and 7. But you can see here what's happened because of no planning and suburban development. So you all are probably counting lanes yourself now. So now we're up to probably 9 or 10 lanes here. And you notice there's no land uses right up to it. It's all auto-oriented, gas stations. What buildings are there is set back, faceless. This is a metro-oriented, but it didn't have to look this way. And as you can tell, there are no pedestrians in a very urban area with, billions of dollars of investment. So can we start to transform these streets and humanize them and make them for all people so you don't induce auto traffic and just encourage that? this is what the plan showed our streets would be like, which was just remarkable. So streetcars or BRT, not overwhelmed with throughput travel lanes, a lot of pedestrians. So this is what our ultimate goal is. And here is a street that was done by the developers of the borough. And when you see people, remember that video I showed from San Francisco, when you see people just walking in the middle of the street, you know they feel safe. This is a slow speed, humanized street for all people to use. So kudos to these developers for creating this, and for our planners and transportation folks for making this happen. And of course, you can see the tremendous growth in Tyson's as well. And it just continues to expand and expand. And it is the biggest driver of revenue, tax revenue in our county, followed by Drainsville, but then Hunter Mill, which has Reston, is a very close third. So you can see when you do this kind of development, it really pays off. And we need this kind of investment to pay for all the goods and services that our county provides. And here, so starting in DC, where the jobs are and where development's happening, this is the Roslyn-Ballston corridor, and then now you're in Fairfax, and this is now becoming Tech Row. And Innovation Station is the last one in our county, and we're meeting with those developers as we speak to create a whole other place there, like a little Tyson's. They have 100 acres, so not like Tyson's, but that idea, particularly with the investment in Metro. And the other thing we want to be sure of is to continue attracting millennials. You can see that Arlington's eating our lunch in DC and Alexandria. These are the densest, most walkable places. And then the more suburban places, we're all in this category. But this is where the Gen Zs and Gen Ys and millennials all want to be. So we need to be mindful of that, because they're going to be they are the employees, and they're going to be the future employees of these companies that we have and are trying to attract. So we talked about Reston, Tyson's, Mosaic, or Merrifield. And then we have what are called CRDs, Community Revitalization Districts. And these are those older commercial centers of suburbia that we're now seeing aren't quite working because they don't have that walkability factor. Remember what I showed you in Summon Corners. So how can we transform what's already there, that already has the bones of suburbia, and transform it into more urban walkable places, more like towns? So one of the places we've started with is Route 1. And as you recall from those old photos, it was just a 2-lane country road. And we've decided to put in the BRT, bus rapid transit. Maybe one day Metro will extend down this way, but BRT is the stepping stone to that. And we have, these are half-mile circles, the diameter. So typically people will walk a quarter mile to a half mile, because that's a 10 to 20 minute walk. So for example, if you live in this neighborhood, you know you can get to BRT, rather than hop in your car, you're going to walk there and then take BRT up to Metro into town. So we're focusing on what we call CBCs, these are central business areas, and working to revive this corridor from what's now the Strip into a real place. So this is what it looked like back when it was the country road. This is what it became with the Strip. When everyone, it was just kept, it was a land grab. You bought land, you put whatever use you wanted on it. It was not planned or well thought out. And so we really want to transform it into really a main street. So rather than reward the through traveler who's just trying to get to Prince William or up to Alexandria, we really want to create place, more like a Connecticut Avenue, or the beautiful streets you see in other places. So this is what they did in Alexandria. They put in a BRT here. It's called Metro Way. Might have changed the name by now. And then they Ours will be 3 lanes, but this is 2, but you start to get the idea where, again, you start to humanize the place. Then the land uses start to reflect that. So now, rather than just have a parking lot or a single use, you know, in a sea of asphalt, now you have denser urban development that has a relationship with the street and starts to build from there, so that this area can now be walkable. And across the street, they have commercial uses. So this is really transforming before our eyes. This is one of the renderings. So this would be Route 1. We're adding bike lanes and sidewalks and public spaces, new architecture to all complement each other. So we create the there that we're trying to, that we're seeking. This is further up on Route 1. This will be interesting in Crystal City. Their grand plan going like a DuPont circle, but they're redesigning their Route 1 as we speak. So we're curious to see what they'll come up with. They already have Metro, so they're not adding BRT here, but as you can see, they want to change their suburban strip Route 1 into a gracious boulevard. And this is the kind of place that Amazon was attracted to, because it already had an urban sense. It actually had a street grid and a there and metro stations, and it was close to the airport. So what can we do on our Route 1 to attract investors? And right now, this is what it looks like when you arrive in Fairfax. And if we're going to count lanes, this is 11 lanes wide. And what could we do to send a different message? That you can see there's no pedestrians, no cyclists. We do have bus service here, but it's just not inviting to those people. The message is get through here as fast as you can. But we're giving away value when we do that. We could really make this a special place. If you turn around, this is Route 1 in Alexandria. This is also a gateway. And I don't know if you noticed, but the ADT here is 50,000. So VDOT says, well, then you got to have 10 or 11 lanes of traffic, or lanes. But Alexandria, they designed their streets. VDOT isn't involved with their streets. And they said, no, we'll have 6. And they manage. And as a result, more people walk and bike and use transit. And so it really makes a difference. And the message you send when someone arrives that you're welcome to this place. All users are welcome to this place. We don't want you to just get through it. We want you to go to it and come to a place that's worthy of visiting. So the challenge is that Fairfax County was built on the suburban model, and that's auto dominant, and we just can't solve for traffic by continuing to widen, because what we're doing is inducing more traffic. So we need to get smarter about this. And really, the solution is to rethink our street design for all users, so we actually induce pedestrian and bike travel, and really cut down from what we call the SOV, single occupant vehicle rate. So in Fairfax, that is 71%. It's really high. In DC, it's about 50. So that's a really good goal to have, right? That we could start to measure that and try and figure out how we move the needle. Places like Tyson's, places like Reston, the new Silver Line opening up here, with 4 new stations opening in the county by next summer, we're hopeful. So when the Beltway was built, it was 4 lanes, and they never thought about traffic. It wasn't an issue. That's just not what cities had, because there were so many ways to get around in a city. And you had the density and multimodal. But in suburbia, there was really only one way to get in and out and through. And so by the 1980s, the Beltway had already doubled. And they set aside land for widening. But they didn't realize that this was going to happen. They didn't think people would be going 10, 15, 20 miles an hour in the morning to get to work. That wasn't the plan. You were supposed to be able to go 60 miles an hour all the time. And then, of course, this wasn't supposed to happen. So when places, this is Springfield. So when places like Springfield got built, we had the Beltway was being planned. Oh, I'm sorry, 95, Shirley Highway, that was being planned. and the Beltway is up here. And so Shirley Highway went from a local street, then we made it a limited access highway. But these subdivisions were going in the 50s and 60s. And it was great because you were close to DC. You could take Shirley Highway up to the Pentagon or wherever you worked, and or go over to Maryland and the Beltway. But because we started isolating the uses, this came in the 70s. These people aren't walking to the mall. Right? This isn't Main Street. Even these shopping centers that were done in the 50s and 60s, most people hop in their car. And so the major arterials were put in, but we didn't, again, have that fine grain of the grid. And so now developers and property owners are starting to rethink this. And if you look here at Springfield Town Center, they've now come up with a plan to make it a place, walkable, dense, right near Metro, that gives it an identity. And it will start to change how people travel and get to this place and get through this place. So that's a really good thing. And we'll have streets like this within it. We're working on the ones that are around it to try and bring those down to size. But if you look at, like, here's Route 7 in Falls Church, and it's only 4 lanes. And they just decided, no, this is our city, and they have a grid. It's not real extensive, but they're never going to widen this road. And so people travel on other streets or walk or use other modes of transportation. But look what it did for the economics and the kind of land use that resulted, not the big parking lots and all that, but it really became a place. It started as a little village and really grew into a beautiful place. Here's an example in comparison. So this is 29, and it's not 4 lanes. It's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's probably about 8, way overbuilt. And what it does, it's built for peak hour. And even then, this is probably overdone. They're projecting further development will happen. But it results in high speed. You notice there's no pedestrians, even though they put in the sidewalk. That's back here. This is actually a gutter. The buildings really don't have a relationship with the street. If this was done in the traditional sense, the sidewalk and bike lanes would be here, the buildings would be here. You'd really get a sense of place. You'd have street trees. You'd calm the traffic. You'd humanize this place. Instead, what we're doing is sending the message to just get through here. We don't want you. This isn't about placemaking, in other words. But it's starting to change. So this is near Government Center on Monument Drive. And in this case, the road's not too wide. It's 6 lanes. I don't know if we need the turn lane, but okay, 6 lanes, not bad. And then the owner decided to hire a good architect, Torti Gallis, and they really designed a nice place here and put in the street trees in the right locations. Be nice to have on-street parking, but at least now we're starting to set the bones here where it's much better, stronger relationship between the street and the buildings. And you actually see a couple of pedestrians. So when you see that, you know it's becoming a success. And here, right around the corner, these new townhouses went in, and I was going over to see how they were doing. I noticed that they had done a lot of the things that we want developers to do, the sidewalks and the street trees, the street's not too wide. And when you have people with strollers and little kids right on the street, again, you know things are going well. So kudos to the developer and the staff for having this this type of development occur. As opposed to over here, you can see that whole development turned its back to the street. So we're starting to shift that and face the street. Here's this is like many roads in Fairfax. Some are even wider, but this is in Silicon Valley, before and after. But again, you can see how many lanes are dedicated to the car. This is Camino Royale. Interestingly, so that's the Royal Road on the West Coast that the King of Spain built. We got the King's Road on the East Coast that the King of England built. So that's interesting. but they're looking at transforming it. It's the same place. And what they did is they widened the sidewalks, they added the on-street parking, they're dedicating less lanes to the cars and giving it to bikes and people. And you can see here, it's the same right-of-way width. That was that edge and that other one. But look how different it feels. And then people just start to come out of the woodwork. A lot of times we hear, well, no one will walk there or bike there. It's like, yeah, that's true. Today they won't, but they're there. I mean, there are people here who know how to walk or bike, and pedestrians know where they're wanted. They know where they're safe. They intuitively know it. And it's mostly around speed and also beauty and what feels right and what's comfortable, why trees are so important. And cyclists know where they're safe. And then you start to change the infill, then the land becomes more valuable and you start to bring buildings closer to the street, and it adds to the vibrancy. And then it's a people grower. People just grow in places like this. It's fantastic. There's not a place for people. So this is another VDOT special, and it goes over 66, and they put in the Jersey barrier and the chain link to protect pedestrians. But the reason they need it is because the speeds are so high here. There's, again, no on-street parking. There's no bike lanes. It's too wide. And it's not a nice experience. Sometimes I've walked this, and it's not pleasant. I do it because I have to sometimes. And I'll see the same mom with a stroller or family, and they deserve better. They deserve this. And so this is the Duke Ellington Bridge in DC on Calvert Street Road. Adams Morgan is here, and Connecticut Avenue is behind you. And so who do they give the priority to? Pedestrians and the cyclists. It's the bike lane here. Cars can get through, but the message is slow down. This is a special place for all people. And you start to see the environment change because of that. Here's another one in DC. You could tell this was so carefully thought out. It's like no chain link or Jersey barriers, and it's a great civic space. And streets can be great civic spaces. They're not just about moving cars. They're about people, our identity. They even have public art here. These were apparently imported from Italy. They thought about the placement of the street and what you'd see at the end. That's Arlington Cemetery, obviously, the Lee Mansion above. And then look at all the pedestrians that are here, and the traffic is calm. I mean, they have 6 lanes, it's a lot, but they thought about every detail, the street lights. It's just beautiful, and we deserve to have that throughout Fairfax. So one of the issues with suburban roads is that we use what's called LOS, level of service. I call it level of stupidity. And it's a methodology that was created in the 50s, rather arbitrarily, by some traffic engineers who said if you're going less than, if you wait, it's about traffic delay at a light. So if you have to wait less than 10 seconds, it's an A. If you have to wait more than 80 seconds, it's an F. And this has been driving road design, particularly in suburbia, for the past probably 75 years. And how it works is they measure peak hour, usually morning is the toughest. And they draw a line and say, if you get an F, then you have to add lanes and you blow up the intersection. And all this area here is wasted the rest of the day. And that's why cars go so fast when there aren't many cars there, because there's so much width. And you lose a sense of, of calm and having to go slow to pay attention to people. So here, this is the one I showed you. This is Alexandria. So to a traffic engineer, that would be an F because they have to wait more than 80 seconds, but this is an A. But to an economist, this would be an A, and that would be an F. So it really depends on what the perspective is and the values, and we have to think of all of it, not that we're going to get rid of cars, not by any means. Plus, we've been built on this one model, so it's going to take a while to shift it. But this is how they do analysis. They count cars, and this many are going straight, and this many will turn, and here's how many we think are going to go straight or turn in the future. And so we're looking to change that. And this is what happens in reality. And we keep widening the roads, and then we wonder why people don't want to cross them, because we've alienated the pedestrian. So it's actually inducing more. So even if you widen it, so you go from 2 to 3, people start to change their patterns. So if there's really bad traffic, you might come in a little earlier, a little later, you might carpool, you might take transit, you might walk. And then when they add the lane, people say, oh, there's more capacity on the road, now I'll drive. And then it gets immediately filled up. So, and the sprawl just keeps going further and further out. So we never really can solve for it, not on these major arterials. They're just kind of here to stay. And we're building, our road growth is greater than our population growth, and we're adding to delay. So DC area is better than the national average, and then our growth's a little lower than population, but we're also adding to delay. And we're driving more as a result. So, well, one thing that is really important, why places like Tyson's and Reston is so important, is because the greater your live-work balance is, the less travel you're going to need. So if you live in the city and work in the city, chances are you're going to walk, bike, take transit. The further out you are, the more stress you're putting on the road network. So here you can see more people live outside of Fairfax and work here than live in Fairfax and work outside. So this green, that's what needs to grow. If we could get that to the size of the blue, then that would make a huge difference, because we'd really cut down on the amount of traffic. So on the solution for LOS, a lot of other localities use other methods. So Arlington and Alexandria, they make these decisions themselves, because VDOT doesn't maintain or own their roads. But so we have to work with VDOT on ours. So we've started a process. So our DOT formed a task force, we just met today actually, to look at this issue, which is really exciting, to see, are there other methods out there? Like California just made LOS illegal actually, and they're using VMT, vehicle miles traveled. So they look at it holistically. If you build an office building, how many people are going to walk, bike, or drive? So rather than just look at delay at a traffic light. And there's also health and safety reasons. So for the first time, transportation is causing more greenhouse gas emission, GHG, than energy. It used to be the other way around, but with our buildings getting more and more energy efficient, now transportation's an issue. But interestingly, this year just dropped because of COVID. And you could see what an effect that had with less people driving, and also less air travel. So that was interesting. So we know we can get there. We just got to reduce the car trips. And then safety, as I mentioned, is the #1 pillar of our youth. Cars are, and those are the people who die, but tens of thousands are being injured. And a lot of it just has to do with speed. Slow the speed, particularly where there are people or where we want people. If you slow it to 20, you have a 10% chance of fatality. At 40, which doesn't even seem that fast, 90% chance of fatality. So this is one of the greatest things we could do for our community, just slow the speed. And we know that street width is directly connected to speed. So we got to narrow our roads. And speed also affects our cone of vision. So the slower you're going, the more you're going to see. You probably notice it when you walk and you notice things on the street you might not have noticed when you drive by, because your cone of vision gets so small. So it's just science. So we're working on what's called Vision Zero. What will we have to do to just stop pedestrian fatalities? Many other cities are doing this. And just in the last 18-month period, we've seen 6 head fatalities on Route 1. This is 5 of them because one just happened right here. And they are mostly on the widest parts of Route 1. And most of them are jaywalkers. So this woman, Ms. Alston, jaywalked and got hit here. This woman, Ms. Asante, jaywalked and got hit here. Mr. Dubois, he jaywalked and got hit here. So the common themes are the roads are really wide and the speeds are really high. And the other thing is the blocks are really long. So one of the reasons they're jaywalking is they don't want to walk 1,000 feet to get to a crosswalk. So we were just talking today with staff and where could we add more crosswalks, mid-block crossings, we call them. We have a couple of them here in the county, and we're experimenting with that more and more. But I think that would do a lot. Obviously, if our sidewalks are too narrow, people won't use them as much. Street trees will help because they protect pedestrians, and then they might walk a little further to the crosswalk rather than jaywalk. And of course, narrow bike lanes. I don't know if you noticed, but here, that's the bike lane. And I've never seen a bike on it. And it really isn't fair to the cyclists. And this one, you can see there's no street trees. Look how narrow that sidewalk is. And they just don't want to use it. It's a hot day in summer. So there are things like that. And just people deserve better. This is not okay. And it's really affecting people, older people, people of color, and poorer people disproportionately. We've seen that the highest ped deaths are in the Mason district, which is it's a lowest income district, and the lowest ped deaths are Drainsville with our highest income citizens. So we know there's an equity issue here, and we take that very seriously and are looking into that more and more. And the amount of space we're giving to cars, and I think this really points that out when they turn into canyons. I was going down the street the other day, and this is what we've given to that cyclist, and there's not even a bike lane. I hope they'll make it, but it's just, and look at all this room. We could have built something for him. And then the amount of room, it's incredibly expensive to build car infrastructure when you look at 60 cars versus 60 riders of a bus versus 60 pedestrians or cyclists. It just makes so much more sense from a sustainability and environmental standpoint. And here, this was an interesting one I just saw on using the curb. So just to have cars, 60 people can use the curb that day versus drop-offs, 1,600, all the way up to walking, 72,000. And I thought that was very telling when you think about the economics of what a curb and a street can mean for you economically. And this was a presentation that we gave recently, and we don't have a lot of money. I mean, it's not like the 70s where taxes were much higher. We have a lot more federal money coming in. We rely mostly on the state now and our county. And so we have to be smarter and more efficient about this. And building for pedestrians and cyclists is one of the most cost-effective things we can do in terms of infrastructure. So are there solutions? Yes, of course. Every street should be what we call a complete street, where it's for pedestrians, it's got on-street parking to protect those pedestrians and to slow the speed. Cyclists, cars can be there, public transit, but it's for everybody. We've started Metro in past decades, and now we're adding that last leg that will again open this summer. Multi-billion-dollar investment. Kudos to the people who made this happen. I can't take the credit. I wasn't here, but Tom and others were here. So really, this was a big deal and has transformed these places. This is BRT on Route 1. Again, having the vision to do that. And we want to make sure we're working on the details now to make sure we get it right. We're adding capital bike share throughout the county. Some folks on the call, Chris Wells and Nicole, have been working on this, along with, of course, Tom. And thank you all. This has been a real success, and use has gone up since COVID. Apparently, bike shops, they can't keep the bikes in stock. Everyone's now biking, which is terrific. We're adding more infrastructure so we can get what we call that last mile. So rather than hop in your car, get to Metro, maybe now you'll walk to Metro or take your bike. We're changing lanes. So this used to be 3 lanes for all cars. We gave up the middle lane and gave the outer lanes to cyclists. We're adding connectivity. This is a subdivision behind us. And this is downtown Tyson's. The metro is right there. And this new Vesper Trail went in last year. It's made a big difference. And all those people in that subdivision can now get to metro quite easily. We're adding more sidewalks throughout the county, but also in our urban areas. But this is just, when we talk about a complete street, this is just step one. Now we got to get the street trees. We got to get the bike lanes. We need to add the on-street parking. And it sounds easier said than done, but this is something we're really pushing the BDOT to make happen, so that, again, when you're here, you don't think, oh, it's really about cars and car throughput. No, it's really about place and people and pedestrians, because this is going to get developed one day. This auto dealer is not going to be staying for that long. We now have the first autonomous vehicle in a public autonomous vehicle in Virginia, and it's at Mosaic. It launched last month, and we're very excited. It's called Relay. I can't tell you what a heavy lift this was for staff. We partnered with Dominion, Transurban, and others, the DRPT, to make this happen. And it's a really big deal. It goes from the Dunloring Metro down to Mosaic and loops back. It's about a mile circuit, and in one direction, rather. And we want to see how it works for the last mile again. And it's a pilot, so we're experimenting, but make sure you go down there and try it. And so we need a complete street policy. That's what we're working on now. We want to replace LOS that I talked about. But the other things is slowing the speed. We're working on that on Route 1, actually. Tom and I were just speaking about that. We're going to be working with VDOT to lower the speed on Route 1. On urban streets, we want to lower them to 10, maybe 10.5. Right now, the narrowest we can go is 11. I want to keep pushing for that. I want to limit the number of lanes to 6, no more of these 8, 10, 12 lanes, because it alienates pedestrians. We want to add on-street parking, shorten the blocks, better sidewalks, bike lanes, and shade trees. They're hugely important. They make a street feel so good, but also just basics. It keeps you cooler, and it also protects pedestrians, and because it slows traffic. When drivers notice things in their purview, and trees are one of them. So also a thing called tactical urbanism that some localities are doing on their own. So they closed this pork chop and made it a park and then put in a bike lane. This is in Ohio. Maybe we could apply something like that here. What if we took this and painted it and put in a bike lane that was painted? Who knows? These are streets in, I think, New York and Toronto, where they had a lot of fun experimenting. These are what they call slip lanes. And so they've turned them into little parklets. And they brought the community into it, teaches people about their city, their county, their place. And when they do the work themselves, it really makes them think differently about their environment and their street, and they become part of it and start to want these things for their community. So I'll leave you with this image. But if all our streets could be like this, and we gave equal rank to our pedestrians, our bike riders, our drivers, our transit users, imagine what it could do for Fairfax and build more wealth, make us healthier and wealthier, and protect our environment. So thank you. I know I went a bit over, but thanks for listening through all that. You're a really important committee, and we'd love to have you be part of this. If you have ideas on how we could get there, we'll keep you informed of what we're doing, but we really need people like you to be involved and to help us. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know about the rest of the committee, but I was having like an idea that I wanted to ask you about every 2 or 3 slides. So there's and I suspect that's probably true of half a dozen of the people here who've been involved in this for a long time. So hopefully this is the start of an extended dialogue. And I would love to see if we can start some sort of mechanism by which we could engage with this and ask questions. I'll defer whether I have any questions, but let me go to the committee and see if there's anything that folks would like to ask for clarification, or perhaps anything that would, keeping in mind that we are limited with regards to time. But this was an important presentation. I'm glad we had it. Great use of our very second video conference. So the floor is open.
Can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm in Mason District. Thanks, Ms. Flynn, for the presentation. It's fascinating. Urban planning back from UVA many years ago.
Oh, fantastic.
So you talked about much larger community areas and areas with lots of potential for redevelopment. I would just like to be pointed towards a conversation around redoing the central business district like Annandale, which is already workable, small scale. The CBC plans call for turning, making super blocks and rechanging everything. And I'm just like to know what's the plan for reapproaching what the resource that we already have there for both pedestrian. It already exists in a lot of ways. So that'll be my only question. I have many more, but.
I just toured that with the planner for that area and had lots of thoughts like you do. And first of all, I think we need housing in the core, because if you don't have people living there, you don't have that sense of ownership in that place. So there's just, it's overwrought with commercial, like older commercial. So if we could transform some of those huge parking lots and spaces in the core with density for living, I think that would make a difference. I would add on-street parking to some of those streets. I know it would be a heavy lift with VDOT and their requirements, but Little River Turnpike or Columbia Pike, I think that could make a big difference. It will slow it down. It will also help retail on the streets where it is. And we're starting to get some on-street parking in Tyson's. You saw it in RTC, but those are private streets at Reston Town Center. You saw it in Mosaic, but again, those are private streets. We want to put them on public streets as well. And so that's starting to happen in Tyson's, was one of the first places. So those are some of the initial things I would do there. And I'd love to tour it with you sometime with the planner if you'd like to, and hear your thoughts.
I have many. I would love to do that. I'll follow up.
Okay. Great. Are you painting?
Yes.
Okay. Multitasking. Excellent.
The wonders of COVID. Anybody else have comments?
Hi, this is Sean Newman from Fab. And I just wanted to say thank you. That was a really fantastic presentation. I really appreciated the way you brought the full history of the county into the consideration, as well as a really thoughtful and exciting way forward. I know we have some huge challenges to overcome in order to get to where we would like to be, as far as, more walkable, et cetera. And I understand that a lot of the focus was on, the complete streets aspect of it. What about the zoning aspect of trying to eliminate, single use housing, single family housing, especially to make that more dense in some of the more suburban areas?
Well, because of our model of development, I don't know that we would ever get rid of it completely, but I think it could be concentrated in certain parts of the county. So for example, in the Springfield district, those lots have to remain 5 acres because they're in the watershed, the Occoquan River, and other areas that I can't name specific neighborhoods offhand, but we all know them, and I don't see them changing for a while. So I say let's focus on the areas that we can change, and let's grow those. And then maybe over time, neighborhoods that we never thought could become more urban will be, because they'll see the value of it. So it's we're in this for the long haul. This is decades long plan. But I think where we're starting are good places. And if you have thoughts about single family development that we could be looking at, I know some developers have actually wanted to buy up whole neighborhoods and do what you're talking about, but that's a heavy lift. They're not always able to buy the houses, number one. And then often they get pushback That happened actually at the Vienna Metro. Those many homeowners organized to not want a dense development near single family houses. And so different views on how development should occur.
I guess what I meant was increasing like accessory dwelling units, increasing a low level density of making it so that you can build a duplex or a triplex on a single family lot rather than requiring it to be a single family.
I'm sorry. I totally agree. And I really hope that you all will speak at the board hearing for what we're doing, or we're calling them accessory living units, ALUs. And you can have an apartment in a basement or an attic, not a separate building, not yet, but this is step one of a two-part series. And I believe the board will be voting on that January, February. And I would ask you to please come out and support it, because we have many people who are against it. And why do you think they're against it? Cars, traffic, parking. So we have to really reframe things. And it's one of the most, I think, equitable things you can do, because you give people a chance to live in neighborhoods that otherwise they could probably never live in. You give people a chance to afford a home that they otherwise might not have afforded, because now they know they can get some rent from that home. You use infrastructure, which is extremely valuable, and you're maximizing it more by adding more people to the neighborhood. But there are other people who don't want that. They absolutely don't want that. So it's interesting, when we did a survey, older people said no to the ALUs and younger people said yes. I mean, it was really drawn along generational lines. So it will change over time. And I agree with you. Why not go to duplexes and more? You see it all over in all the major cities, in the suburbs of the major cities. You see these fine mansions, and most of them are multifamily. You just wouldn't know it. It's called a missing middle. That's the kind of housing. So it's very much on our radar. So please come out. Oh, you're Fab. I was going to say, what district are you? There's actually a meeting tonight with the Sully district, and I know there are many people organizing against it, and I'm hoping the people who support it will come out as well, because I think our board will approve it, but they really need your support.
So, Rachel Flynn, this is Stephen Foster in Providence. Thank you for such an excellent presentation. My question would sort of build on what you just were alluding to, which is, I guess, my first part of the question is, how do you think we as a citizen advisory committee can be helpful for the vision that you've laid out? And then the second part of the question is, as you just alluded to, there's a lot of citizen input through land use committees and others that are really focused on not in my backyard. And so we have this duality here of both citizens like ourselves on this committee, who I think are fairly progressive, but we also have citizen voices that are not. And how does the county, balance that, or what can we do to sort of help support the vision that you've laid out?
I think it's really important that you let your representatives know. So whoever is your supervisor, or all supervisors, you can write to all 10. It's really important that they know where people are, because it's hard to get too far ahead of people and get pretty beat up. But if they know there's a lot of support out there, I think that will influence them. And many of them want to make these changes, but they need to know that their constituents are with them. So that's one thing. So as a committee, you could speak. We've had other committees send letters and say, these are some things we support and we'd like you to look at. And then that way they know that as staff, when we bring them forward, like changing LOS or adding options besides LOS, developing a complete streets policy. We also have the active transportation plan, which is now getting underway. As you know, Chris Wells and Nicole are working hard on that. And we absolutely need your support on that. So it can be very ambitious and not just kind of there, but really, I think, be bolder than we'd normally go. So please stay very close. closely attached to that, with the progress. I'm sure Nicole and Chris will keep you up to date on that. And I can let you all know through David Loss and the chair what we're working on and where I think we need your help and where having you speak out would matter. Also, I'd reach out to your neighborhood. If you know that there are people in your neighborhood who support what you do, even having 5 people show up at a board meeting out of 1.2 million people in this county, if 5 people show up and support something, it's huge. It really is. And, or 10, how about 5 to 10? And the board needs to hear that support. And I've seen them at meetings where people just speak so negatively or don't want something, and the board still approves it, and they do the right thing. I really got to hand it to them. We have a really good board. I think they're visionary. I think they're strong. They work extremely hard, and they listen to their constituents. So if you like, do you live in a neighborhood, or do you live downtown, or where do you live?
I'm currently living in a higher density area near Mosaic.
Okay. And so do you know, like, your neighbors, like, are they the types who might come out if you talk to 2 people and they talk to 2 people and that kind of thing, or an HOA maybe?
Yeah, newer, but certainly I work to develop a relationship with my neighbors. So I appreciate the grassroots movement. Yeah.
No, it was a good question, and I'll keep in touch with you all and let you know where we need you. But if certain thoughts that I've shared tonight resonate with you, and you want to share that with the board, I'd be happy to work with you to develop some kind of letter, or just to let them know.
Diami Pipkin from Lead District.
Hi, how do you say Diami? Hi, Diami.
How you doing? Excellent presentation. As a teacher, it's a good thing. You gave very clear talking points, and it's a lot of information that was easy to digest. So,
oh, thank you
for the history lesson. A lot of the things were just fascinating. Couple big points that I just wanted to note. I know we're getting short on time. First things first, I think as someone who formerly lived in Alexandria City, as Washington, D.C., grew up in Baltimore, plan to have a more youth appealing Fairfax County is good. And I think a lot of the plans for urbanization just kind of like tick that box as well. Being somebody who lives in Lead District, I was interested when you said something about the main street of Route 1, based on the fact that in my current location, I'm off of Harrison right next to Huntley Meadows, and seeing Route 1 as it currently is, it's just a car corridor where I'm not really doing much walking outside of the park. So just trying to think more about the Main Street distinction versus urbanization, because when I think of urbanization, growing up in urban areas and living in urban areas prior to moving to Fairfax County, it's the street, but then it's the street behind the street that also has the stuff. So when I'm thinking about activities on U Street, sure, there's lots of stuff on U Street, but there's also some stuff on T Street that people do. And there's also the stuff on the cross street of 14th that people do. So is it more the vision of Route 1 Main Street, or is it more like Route 1 and then, yeah, we're also going to be thinking about South King. We're also going to be thinking about Fort Hunt and how those things intersect.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, we are going to do that. At those CBCs I was talking about, where the BRT stations will be, we want to create like a little grid of streets. They're called livability spines. And so parallel to Route 1 will be another street, a lot like they did at Mosaic. And so that you can you create a village, as it were, right? And then that'll link to the neighborhoods that are adjacent, that are a little less dense, but those people now will come to the village rather than hop in their car, and then you start to build community. So yes, that's a good question. We are doing that. If you look at the Route 1 plan, it's called EMBARK, E-M-B-A-R-K, and that's the Richmond plan. You can see where each of the little villages will be, and it's exciting.
Also, just I don't know if it's a follow-up question or a connected question. Any when you're coming in from Fairfax City and you're hitting right there at the county, is there any plan for maybe establishing stronger county branding as an entranceway or a gateway point to distinguish when you're coming from Alexandria City into the county?
So on Route 1, those images that I showed?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I want. So, Giami, I want you to go out tonight and borrow paint from that other guy who's painting tonight and paint the streets. Put bike lanes on them and put lawn chairs and planters. Yes, I really think we need to change it with the community. So I'd love to talk to you all about what you see as the vision for that gateway. It's on my to-do list. I just haven't been able to get to it to put pen to paper, but it's in my pile of to do things. Couldn't you see that? The tactical urbanism I was talking about? Couldn't you see that? I see that there. We'd have to get VDOT to agree, and that's sometimes that can be tough. That's why we have Tom. Tom helps me with VDOT.
It's getting a little easier.
Little bit.
Tom would disagree. Hey, can I give you two quick questions? First of all, I understand the central business corridors and the like. So I live off of Braddock Road, and there is a quote unquote Braddock Road widening project that's going to be removing crosswalks and placing the bike. We get a couple of bike lanes, but I'm sorry, bike paths on either side of the road, but they'll be connected with a bridge that I agree with you, no one will use, and will be cost about half the price of the project, and a whole bunch of things. It was all conceptualized before you got here, I think. What are you gonna do with that? Because it's subdivision on both sides. It's I don't think it'll ever be a complete street, but I'd like to see us not create sort of a Berlin Wall running right through the middle of the Braddock district. That would not be I think in line with your vision. Second question, probably easier to answer. It seems the design parameters for bicycle travel have changed a bit since I got first involved in this, that bike lanes have kind of fallen out of favor, and that urban planners like to separate the bicycles from the traffic. But it seems to me that one of your goals is bicycles within the street and on the street in bike lanes transform the street. And so you want to do that more. And I'm trying to wonder, there's a conflict there between those two concepts. And how do you adjudicate that conflict?
Well, we're learning a lot about that. It's evolved over time. And it's interesting, like if you look at them, you can see, oh, that was done in the 90s. Oh, that was done in the 00s. Oh, that was done in the teens, because it's changing before our eyes. And Nicole and Chris could certainly speak to this. And that could take a whole other session, and it might be worth it to talk to you about how do you place a bike lane. So, for example, we're doing an area plan for McLean, and we've decided to have a shared section of the sidewalk where it's wide enough that cyclists and pedestrians can share it. Cyclists know to go slowly. Some dismount their bike because there are restaurants there. We're trying to create a main street there. And then when you're through the village, as it were, then you can get back on your bike, go higher speed, and then you're on the bike network in the county, right? The other way, and you've probably seen it in New York City, where you have the moving lanes with the traffic, right? Then you have on-street parking. Then you have the bike lane. So they flipped it. Have you seen that? It's gotten more common now because they want to protect.
That's your complete street, looks like that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, but in that case, in the complete street image, they actually had a curb between the parking and the bike lane. Sometimes they don't do that. It depends on your budget and how much room you have. Sometimes you don't have room for that curb. So that's one way to do it. And if you, again, if you just don't have any space, and I'd have to have Chris and Nicole address this, but you can add a bike lane right next to the cars It's just, it's a little riskier. You know, you always want to protect your cyclists, but if the vehicles are traveling slow, it can usually work. That's the key. But right now we don't have a lot of slow streets. And so I think that question warrants like a whole presentation on how you design streets. And we could do that and bring in some experts we have who have done this all over the country, if not the world.
This is Sean Newman. Can I say one other thing, if you don't mind? The first part is that over the last, I believe, 2 or 3 days, we've had at least 2 bicyclists hit within the county by vehicles. And it's hard to know the circumstances surrounding it because we get very little information either from the county or from the police. And if we are not a member of the incident, then it's hard to request information. So I just wanted to kind of ensure you were aware of that and to trust the county, hopefully, to look more into both those incidents, the causes, the road design, et cetera, and to also hopefully work towards better transparency with some of those. The other question that I had is recently the state legislature allowed for speed cameras for automated speed enforcement in school zones. Have we made any moves toward putting that into place in any of the school zones to work towards slowing the streets in those areas? I understand that the schools are mostly not in use. However, there are still students attending school right now. And so I think people currently have an idea that nobody's in school, so they don't need to worry about those lights flashing in the afternoon and the morning. And I would really like to see the cameras put into place in some very specific places.
We've begun the discussions with the Board of Supervisors, and Tom could probably tell you more about that, where we are in the process. Tom, did you want to address that?
Sure. There actually is a multi-agency group working on that. People from police, our department, transportation department, legislative services are working to develop a path forward for implementing that new legislation on speed cameras in school and construction zones. So I don't have a timeline on it, but there is a group working to prepare something for the board to consider.
So we can make sure that Tom updates David Loss and gets you that information and keeps you informed.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. And then on the death bike accidents, if you could send me the accident. I know there was one off of Route 7 recently where a teenager was killed. And if you can, wherever you're hearing about these or wherever they are, let me know. I can get the information you're looking for. The police send me those reports.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. We have 2 years of data. We've got a whole spreadsheet if you all ever want to see it. We've got it broken down by what time of day, how old the person was, what the particulars are. It's really fascinating. We're drilling down on it now to look at common themes. And that's where I'm seeing a lot of the jaywalking. Oh, and then, I'm sorry, Ken, you had asked about, so we're in Braddock. You said there's a project?
Yeah, Braddock Road from essentially from the Beltway to I'm thinking out as far as Guinea, is a Braddock Road widening project that is going to remove traffic lights in intersections. The whole purpose is to move traffic faster, on the belief that this is a level of service question, of course, on the belief that there will be extensive growth of people who want to use Braddock Road as an arterial, and among this is the creation of bike side paths on both sides in the current plan. So that would, it's for Bikeways committee, it's sort of for me, it's a mixed blessing, but it just strikes me as I listen to your presentation, and it just strikes me as it goes the opposite direction.
Yes.
What you're talking about. So you might want to just take a look at that.
Well, maybe I can clarify. This is Tom. We're not widening Braddock Road. That was a concept that was looked at with a variety of other concepts, and the end result of 3 years of coordination with the Citizen Committee is that all we are essentially doing, we are doing section improvements, and we're putting in shared use paths on both sides of Braddock Road, which don't exist today, but there is no widening of Braddock Road. It's essentially 6 lanes in each direction, and that's the way it will stay.
I'm sorry, I didn't. You're right, Tom, and I do know that. As you know, its name has always been the Braddock Road Widening Project. Yes, that did remove those were removed from that. So I apologize for that part, but my key concern is it does remove several crosswalks.
It removes what, Ken?
Crosswalks.
Oh, it does?
Yes, quite a few, connecting neighborhoods to churches.
I think there's 1 or 2 intersections that are being modified, and one of the things that the community, the citizen group wanted was they did want overpasses, and so those are things that are being looked at. That project is just starting design, but it is something that we'll be, working through with the community as it develops.
Are you part of that, Ken? Are you?
I have expressed my concern several times, and I think the one I did, but I've had plenty of times to discuss it. Let me put it that way. Plenty of opportunities to discuss it, but I believe it's going the wrong direction. I'll be honest, but that's, I'm only one citizen. But I do believe if you do look into it, you will find that it does go pretty much a different direction from what you're talking about.
Okay, I'll take a look. It might be too late to incorporate all my ideas, but you never know.
Oh, I don't know, because I don't think we have money to do a lot of this right now. So it's just not one of those things that's set in stone by any way.
Okay. Yeah, if you could send that to me, Tom.
And I'll give you an email on my concerns. I'll sort of put it up to both Tom and Rachel so that you see what I'm talking about. Okay. It is now 9 o'clock. Obviously, folks are welcome to tune out if they want. This has been a critically important meeting for all of us. And I want to be sure that anybody else who's had an opportunity to ask questions has had an opportunity. So anybody who hasn't asked a question yet want to come forward? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I was just wanted to. Hi, Rachel. Jim Klein, Mount Vernon District. I just wanted to follow up on your on whether or not any of the ideas about streets in Fairfax have made it into the legislative agenda for the county going forward to the state legislators this year.
You mean in terms of funding or?
In terms of policy changes at the state level that would help achieve some of these things?
Not yet. Maybe, when we get further along with LOS, maybe there's something we could do there. Although they've told us that LOS is not the quote law, it's a policy. So we're hopeful that it doesn't have to go to something like the GA or even the CTB, Commonwealth Transportation Board, but we, no, I'm not aware of anything. Tom, are you?
No, not this session.
Also, this session, senators and delegates were limited on the number of bills they could put forward. I think because they had such a long session this fall that they said, okay, we got to cut this thing shorter. So they were, I think, 8 for delegates and 12 for senators. So they had to cut way back. So. But what would be one? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it comes back. I think I spoke to you earlier about the statewide pedestrian safety action plan.
Mhm.
And the ability to be able to plan our street widths and things for the future land use compared with, you know, what they're acting to now. I'm wondering if there isn't some way that could be hurried along. I just don't, I think Route 1 particularly, it would be immensely important, so that we can get more Route 1 to look what we want it to, rather than what it would result if the policies that VDOT applies right now continue to be applied.
Yeah, we did ask, well, as part of to lower the speed, so it's currently posted at 45, and we want it to come down to 35, and we think they'll do it. They actually, VDOT, to their credit, tried to do that before, and then it got rejected by the community, oddly enough. That was about 10 years ago. So now the community is very much behind it. And I said, you better be, and you better put it in writing, because we don't want to do that to VDOT again, because that's quite costly to do all that study. So we're about to, Tom's looking for some resources now to ask them to go forward again. And while they're doing that, we thought, well, maybe you can narrow some of the lanes or do this or do that, but it's not going to happen. It's too late. They're 30% into the drawings, and it's not going to happen next time. But we got our street trees, and instead of 12-foot lanes, they're 11-foot lanes. So that's good. And we got bike lanes and separated sidewalks, so that's nice. And undergrounding is pending. We're just trying to figure out if we can find the funds for that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
What's undergrounding?
Trying to underground the utilities on Route 1, if we can find the funding.
So any more questions, folks?
This is Wade Smith in Drainsville. I'll ask one. I know it's late, but the ideas in planning change, as we all know. If we were having this talk in, say, 1960, we'd all be super excited about the new Rosslyn that's going to be built, and the Wake, and we'd be all excited about the new Crystal City that's going to be built, or tearing down everything in Southwest Washington and making that wonderful. And especially the new Tyson's Corner that was just being built. So now we're undoing all that. So how do we, it's kind of an unanswerable question, I understand, but how do we know that we're going the right direction this time when we were all excited about Rosslyn and Crystal City and Tyson's in 1960?
Well, you know, the bones, we have learned a lot with the suburban experiment. And as I was alluding to before, you know, we've had 7,000 years of civilization and building cities, and we really did it right for most of those thousands of years. And then again, with the car, it just threw everything, because time and distance just changed, and that affected how we planned. So it was all good intentions. I don't think anybody meant to do harm. They just thought, God, we have all this land, we've got cars, we've got money for infrastructure, let's go for it. And then we saw the downside, a thing called traffic and environmental issues that they just weren't on our radar. So I think we know what works, because it always has. And the experiment of suburbia, I mean, we'll always have suburbia, but it's like, how can we now manage it in a way that's more sustainable financially, but environmentally and health-wise? And even with Crystal City, what was it, Charles Smith? I mean, he really laid out a good grid. It's very urban, and they got the metro there. And so the only thing they're changing now is Route 1. They're going to, I think, put that on a road diet, bring it down to size, get rid of those overpasses, and just have a regular street grid. It remains to be seen. They're planning it now. And even Rosslyn, that has a grid. And so now, but now they're humanizing it more to make it more walkable, adding more features that slow the speed and bring out the urban qualities. So I think we know what to do. Yeah.
Okay, so again, I have to thank you for your presentation. I think we have your contact information. Is that right?
Yes, you know where to find me.
That's right. It's
I'm on this invite, so my email is rachel.flynn@fairfaxcounty.gov. Would love to hear from you.
okay. So obviously we have given this the entire 2 hours worth of attention. I hope Chris Wells had not prepared a fairly lengthy thing, but we'll have to put that off until next week, next month for the staff report for this month.
Chris. What was it to present on? What was Chris going to talk to?
Oh, he does a staff report for us, so we get a monthly update. So obviously we get one every month, so we can live another month without it. And
No worries.
I didn't think you'd be good. And I have taken a look at the agenda that we were going to active and unresolved issues. I don't think there's anything here that is sufficiently urgent that needs to be dealt with. But I will open the floor to see if there are any other urgent issues that a committee member wants to bring to the table before we adjourn. All right. That having been said, our next meeting is going to be the regular meeting, the second Wednesday of second Wednesday of January. We'll have elections then, and it'll be a regular meeting. We do not have, I don't think, a speaker lined up. Chris or David or Bob, am I right there?
I think you are right.
So far. So
would you like to have us talk about bike lanes and what you had asked about, Ken, and the different ways that you can configure bike lanes?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let me reserve that for a bit because I don't know what's going to crop up over the month. But we will get to bike lanes, and that's a worthy topic of talking about. I had a couple of other suggestions that were bouncing around in my kit bag that I also might want to address that might be timely, but I have to communicate with a few people before I set it up. So
Ken, this is Nicole Winans. One thing we will need to talk about in January is the bicycle friendly community application, which is due on February 10th. So I will email out the application we submitted last time 4 years ago for review. And it would be really helpful if anything had changed in your different groups, you do new bike events or something that you would like to add to the application. If that could be filled out and returned back to me so we can integrate that in the updated application.
Okay, good idea. And I think, was that one of the things that needed or benefited from some sort of formal endorsement from the committee? Is that also true, or am I not remembering that right?
I don't think a formal endorsement is needed, but it is a collaborative application. It is supposed to represent everything the community does, not just the government. So equal weight is given to, for example, what FAB is doing or what WABA is doing or what other groups are doing that I may not know about. So we submitted a really comprehensive application 4 years ago. We have the ability to access that application, just make updates to it. But I know a lot has happened in the past 4 years. So just think about what you would like to highlight, what your organization did. And we can include that in the application.
So Nicole, you're going to send that out to the full committee, correct?
Yes, correct.
Wonderful. Great. No, that's perfect. Yeah, send that out hopefully soon, and we'll start working that around with FAB, and I'll make sure that that WABA is aware of that as well.
Ken, this is Wade Smith in Drainsville. Do we need to pay a little more attention to the Capital Trails Network? That we may have missed that train already, but it's going to be finalized if I'm not mistaken. And we've never really looked at that at the committee level. I've done it, worked here in Drainsville on the Drainsville part, but is that something we need to be considering?
Howard, I saw you joined us. You have brought it up a couple of times in our meetings. Are you tracking that?
Mute. Yes, it is something the committee should be looking at and making suggestions, because the Council of Governments and other regional organizations have given their endorsement to it, and I think the committee should look at the different proposed routes and make changes as needed for both the park authority, the transportation, and public works, if there are any public work trails.
So Ken, let me add to that. Nicole and I have met, and Beth have met with the Capital Trails Coalition on doing this update. I think there's time for us to still contribute to it. Beth and the Park Authority in particular asked for a little bit more time to review some of the potential trails on Park Authority property. Wade was involved because we did circulate this with all the 9 board offices, and yes, Wade and Howard, that's a great idea. That's a perfect material for the committee. There's an existing Capital Trails network that was already established. Unfortunately, Fairfax County was told originally that we could only have trails that existed or were already funded, and then the process moved forward without an ability for us to provide any new information, and then other jurisdictions were given different direction where they could actually use trails that were still proposed. So we are very interested in updating this map. It would have been done as part of the active Fairfax transportation plan anyway. We hope it will be done. We're envisioning a hierarchy, just like the highway system has freeways and highways and local streets. We envision the same sort of thing for a trails network. So Nicole has drafted up with input from the board offices the revised network, but it's still in draft form that staff is still working on. So I think January would be a perfect time to bring it back to the committee.
Okay,
so maybe by February or March, if the different representatives on the committee then could have a month to look at it, and by March, I would think we should be ready to endorse it or make suggestions.
Yeah, the Capital Trails Coalition told us that it was not a hard deadline. They would rather us get our input correct and give us the time to do that work.
There is some interest from the supervisor level though to have it done sooner rather than later. So I'm not sure if the 4-month timeline is feasible, but I can send it out for your review, and then we can maybe have a discussion at the January meeting. And I just want to clarify that it won't change anything in the comprehensive plan. So it's all existing trails on our comprehensive plan that just would be getting this designation or higher importance in a, say, funding situation.
Correct.
On the table, you're going to send it to the committee. Everybody take a look in your district and ask yourself, is there something on the comprehensive plan that should be on the capital bike trails plan? Is that
correct?
Yeah.
That was that was a hard rule on our part, that we were not proposing anything new. This was our existing trails plan, and just taking a look at which of those corridors had potential regional connectivity significance.
Okay.
Yeah, quick question.
It has specific criteria. I mean, you can't just put everything on there. You do need to be selective and meet the criteria they've established.
Okay, good.
And this is Beth Iannetta from Park Authority. We just haven't had a chance to look at the proposals in depth yet. So we just received the latest version to look at it. So we haven't had time to look at it.
Yeah. So given the timing of it all, for us to come back in January, I would suggest that we do what Nicole said. We'll go ahead and distribute it, but with the asterisk that that is draft, and we're still reviewing it as staff. And again, we want to make sure that there's nothing that the Park Authority is uncomfortable with. Again, the idea is not to create anything new or to create any drama. We're just trying to take the trails plan that we all know and love and get some more exposure to the regional connectivity that we unfortunately missed out on, given the original direction that our jurisdiction was given. It was ultimately different from the other jurisdictions.
Okay, good. There's a plan. Any other urgent issues, folks?
I did want to mention one thing, and this is probably an area that is near and dear to the community. There's a gentleman named Mike Doyle from Alexandria Families from Safe Streets. He has been working to establish a Fairfax Families for Safe Streets, and we've had a couple monthly meetings. There's another one coming up in December. It's a grassroots effort from either victims of pedestrian crashes or family members of victims of fatalities of pedestrian crashes. So they've been very successful in Alexandria. They've become a de facto partner with the city government and with the police department on a lot of their education and strategies in implementing their Vision Zero policy. So he's asked us as staff if we are aware of other interested members of the community. So I'm certainly aware of some of the individuals I've worked with on Safe Routes to School efforts, and I promised him that I would at least make that introduction between them and us. I'm not necessarily endorsing it. I just want to, make that introduction. So I would do the same for the committee. That I'll forward. I'll have David forward his email. There's a meeting coming up December 17th. And again, it is part of this, as Rachel was saying earlier, this getting the message to elected leadership and others that there are real people who have suffered and who are standing up for a better world for pedestrian and bicycle safety, and it's a network that is built off of, I think, New York's. So they're setting up, different jurisdictional versions of this. There's an Arlington one, and the Alexandria one, and they're setting up a Fairfax one, and it'll fall under the umbrella of Virginia Families for Safe Streets. So their focus is lobbying Richmond for changes in the laws and things like that. But I did want to mention that because it is, really right up the alley of many of the things we discuss here on the committee. And again, just make that introduction. If for you all as individuals, or if there's others that you know of that might unfortunately be already victims of crashes or have loved ones who've been victims of crashes, it's a way to be involved in something that's very important to those folks.
I'll add on to that Mike has definitely been successful in bringing people down to Richmond to lobby directly for some of the laws that were passed last year. And that FAB is definitely working with the Families for Safe Streets groups to help make things better here.
I'd also like to thank the committee for posting the link to last month's meeting. There were a couple of things mentioned on that it's very helpful to have the recording there if you need it. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, David.
I don't do it, but I'll take credit. Sure thing.
Whoever did it with staff. Thank you. All right. with that in mind, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So move.
All right, 9:19, and we will see you all next year. Have a happy holiday.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Take care.